Alright, so what would you like me to say, kind of?
Who are you?
Alright, I'm Fedea, I'm a YouTuber, I'm a skeptic, I'm an individualist, and I am just a regular dude who has his own ideas. And I hope that you enjoy our podcast with Mr. Dragonbear.
I must know.
Yeah, they can find me at my YouTube channel is called Fedea, so it will be Fede and then a space and just an A, so it will be Fede space A.
Inconceivable! You keep using the word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Yeah, I appreciate it too, Dragon, and it was a great talk. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back to another episode of Apostasy Now. This week's guest needs no introduction, Michael Shermer. But I'm going to give him one anyways. We discussed first off his book, The Moral Arc. I highly recommend it. I've read it, and it's out on paperback now. I'd be interested in hearing any feedback that you have, and I'm sure he would as well. He's done it all. He's a great speaker. He's a professor, an author, obviously. He's written many books, and he's somebody who doesn't just talk about skepticism. He puts his money where his mouth is. If you stay tuned through to the end, we really crack some skulls about this kind of oversensitive PC culture that's been riding waves lately. I highly recommend it. So, sit back, relax. This is another episode of Apostasy Now.
Certainly can use it. This little thing is the thing the whole world talking about.
I guess we can both talk to him at the same time.
Well, like we're working together?
No, not like we're working.
Yeah!
No, like we're working in the same vicinity.
Together.
In the same area code.
Together.
The same county. And don't get all we are the world on me either. When this is over,
Well,
I'm
we're
gonna shoot
partners.
you. When this, yeah, but I'm still
Come
gonna
on,
shoot
man,
you.
Ebony and Ivory. Shit, I think he's puked or he's dead.
Because I'm very much a skeptic. I'm more of a skeptic than I am an atheist. I mean, atheist is a conclusion based on my skepticism.
So you'd be better if you were straight?
Yes.
Wow.
Anybody would be.
That attitude is what is responsible for the rise of atheism.
That's not what Islam is all about. Islam is peace.
What is the penalty for leaving the Muslim faith?
With the death penalty.
Thank you.
This is Apostasy Now.
For people to get the information correct before they start yapping.
Get ready to root for the bad guys.
Resist it while you still can, and before the right to complain is taken away from you, which will be the next thing.
You're the Apostasy boys, huh?
Yes, we are the apostates.
Sounds good.
All right, well, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How long are we going for today? I forget.
I don't think we set a time. I figure you're probably the busier person, so we'll allow you to set the... usually it's about an hour, but some guests, they really enjoy the conversation, so I can go longer if you want.
Hour is plenty long. I mean, maybe more like 45 minutes or something.
Sure.
I mean,
sure.
there's only so much time people have to listen to podcasts.
So you are a busy guy. You've authored a whole bunch of stuff. You speak a lot. And I know I've been going through the Moral Arc. I really like it.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, for our audience sake, what kind of, we'll start with what kind of got you thinking about this? Because obviously you put a lot of work into it.
I did, yes. Well, excuse me. It was kind of the sequel to The Believing Brain. At the end of The Believing Brain, I talk a lot about politics and ideology and morals and values and then so I just started thinking about that around 2011 or so. And in my previous books, I had thought about, written about morals and, morals without God, morals without religion, that is, secular values and where they came from. And so I just put it all together in the Moral Arc. And, there are other books, Steven Pinker's, the Better Angels of Our Nature, and Sam Harris's The Moral Landscape, and Robert Wright's Non-Zero, and Matt Ridley's The Rational Optimist. There's a body of literature of books on morals and values that talk about moral progress and optimism. There's a boatload of pessimistic books. The end is coming and all that. And so I thought I'd do something a little more optimistic, because that is what I believe. I am an optimist in that sense.
The moral arc, the term, did that start with Dr. King, or did somebody else use it before?
That gets traced back to the 1860s and actually 1850s, and a guy named Theodore Parker, a Unitarian minister and abolitionist, slavery abolitionist, who penned the metaphor that there's an arc to the moral universe and it bends towards justice, and that's where Dr. King got that phrase. Most of the stuff in Martin Luther King's speeches comes from other sources. Nothing wrong with that at all. That's everybody does that. Excuse me. And so sort of putting it together with biblical tropes and references, that was pretty common for King's speeches, and that's where that comes from.
Right. So I guess again, for people who are listening to this, we should probably just briefly say a little bit about, I guess, what you feel the moral arc sort of entails. I guess we can't go into all of it, because in the book there's just a lot of material that you go through, but just a general sense, I guess, so that anyone who hasn't read it and is thinking about getting it.
Yes, they should. It comes in different parts. So initially I need to establish that there is an arc to the moral universe, that actually things are really getting better. To most people, that seems counterintuitive. It doesn't feel like things are getting better. It feels like things are getting worse. And that's because we pay attention to the news. We follow the headlines. Yeah. and if you do that, it does seem like things are bad, because that's the job of the media, is to report the bad things that happen for the day, not all the good things that happened, or the thing, or that nothing happened. Like another day without a civil war breaking out in North America. Well, no surprise, there's nothing to report there. But of course, we focus on the civil war in Syria, because that's where the action is. So it seems like things are bad, but if you actually look at the number of civil wars, interstate wars and civil wars that have broken out over the last 50 years, you'll see a declining trend, and that's good news. So the little catchphrase is follow the trend lines, not the headlines.
Right.
And when you do that, you see that there is progress.
Right. Like, I think it's really hard for anyone to dispute that we're probably living in one of the most peaceful times in human history. I just think that our ability to transmit the violence that does occur kind of creates this, I think it's a principle called availability heuristics.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so people just think that it happens more often because that information is, like you said, displayed more in the media. And that's kind of
available,
sad.
Right. So one of the things we're trying to do is to remind people, follow the trend lines, not the headlines. If you want to ask that question, are things getting better or are things getting worse? And it's a little bit like, just think of the global warming curves. They go up and down, up and down, up and down, but the overall trend line is upward. Mm-hmm. So of course there's years where, it gets a little bit cooler, or the seasons where it gets cooler. But what we're interested in is, where's the long-term trend going? And what can we do, to either keep it going or change it in case of global warming? And in terms of moral progress, expanding civil rights and civil liberties to more people in more countries, that's been the trend. So how can we do more of that? So what I try to do in the second part of the book is look at the cause of each of these different rights movements, civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, animal rights, and future rights, environmental rights, or whatever. What can we do? I mean, first of all, what have we learned, and what are the cause and effects relationships we've discovered over the centuries of that cause the moral sphere to expand, to include more people? And then what can we do to continue that? Things like spreading democracy and open trade with other countries, like opening trade relations with Cuba is a good idea, because that means we're going to have more interactions with Cubans. And, so I kind of go through why that's a good thing, psychologically, socially, culturally. The internet, spread of ideas online, which automatically just jumps borders. There are no political borders online. And so that's more of a little bit of good news.
Yeah. My question to you would be, do you see any sort of danger in like how should I put this? The morality that seems to be leaning us towards kind of social betterment kind of being hijacked? Or do you think that perhaps this availability of bad information tends to propagate the idea that people who have kind of overcome their struggles are still being unduly oppressed, and that this kind of creates a moral outrage where there really isn't any?
Yes, well, there is some of that. Just in the last year and a half or so, in college campuses in particular, but in culture at large, of this whole business of microaggressions, and I'm concerned about the re-emphasis of race. I mean, we've been working for a century now to try to dispel the notion that race and racial differences are real and biological, and all that stuff that was being picked up in the late 19th century, and then really promoted in the eugenics movement. We've spent half a century debunking that bad science, the pseudoscience, and now the emphasis on college campuses is that if you say I'm not a racist, or I don't see race, or seeing people as black and white, I don't see people as black and white. Now that's considered to be a microaggression. You're a sinner if you don't see race. We want got to see race. Race is everywhere. Race is everything. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. That's going to take us backwards, because it's such an easy step to go from that to, looking at racial differences. And anytime there's, say, differences in SAT scores or GRE scores or GPAs or athletics or anything, people are going to say, well, it's because they're black, or they're women, or they're Jewish, or what. It's like, whoa, we're just lost a century of moral progress. So I'm really concerned about that, and there's a lot of us now speaking out against that, and I think more of us need to do it. And furthermore, I think these college administrators need to quit caving into these cry bully students.
I love that term, cry bullies. It's so true.
Yeah, I don't know who coined that term, but it's a great term, because they're not just wilting little wimps. I mean, they're fascistic, authoritarian bullies. They cry like they're babies, but they're really bullies underneath, and they're making all these demands. And some of these college administrators are caving in, because in part because the administrators are the uber liberals from the 60s and 70s that are now in positions of power, and they feel like they should be supporting these causes, but they don't realize that it's going to have the opposite effect of what they were working toward all those decades.
I had quite a few episodes back, I put a clip of George Carlin on a radio show where they asked him about this sort of political correctness, is what's, I guess, the term that a lot of people are throwing around for it. And the way he expressed it is that he expected it. He grew up expecting it from the conservative right, but he felt it was a betrayal that it was coming from the left, particularly on university campuses.
Yeah. I'd love to know what George Carlin must be spinning in his grave now. About what's being protested. And I'd love to hear what Hitch would have to say about all this as well. We have to pick up that mantle and carry it.
Yeah, I think a lot of good people that give us the principles. One of the things that I like when I go through your material is how you're willing to take a step back from your initial perceptions, and you don't just tell people to do this. You take a step back and you go, let's look at the evidence, let's sift through it, and see if we need to hold a position that we started with or change it. And I imagine you get flack for that. I see you posting about gun violence in the United States from time to time. You initially started out on the other side of this, right?
Yeah, I changed my mind about that. Well, it's like a lot of these issues I hadn't thought that much about it. I just hold certain positions by default. And then if for whatever reason I'm writing an article or doing a debate or something, and I really need to get steeped into the literature and figure out what's going on, then then I'm willing to change my mind. In other words, I try not to identify with a position ahead of time that would force me to look at the data in a certain way because I want it to come out a certain way. I mean, everybody does that. I do that. But I try not to do it because I recognize that, that's a problem. So, for example, I tend to lean libertarian in my politics, fiscally conservative, socially liberal, but not necessarily across the board, because the moment you give the label to somebody, oh, you're a libertarian, oh, you're like Rand Paul or Ron Paul or whoever. And then it's like, well, no, I'm actually not like Rand Paul. I don't agree with Rand Paul on this point or that point. I do agree with him on this other point over here. So I try to focus on issues. Let's just take the issues one at a time. Yeah. So as a libertarian, you're supposed to be against all gun control. Well, I'm not. So what does that make me? I don't know.
You're an apostate.
And lately, I've been changing the word usage. I don't know who started this, but I think it's a good idea. From gun control to gun safety.
Yeah.
I mean, we're never going to get rid of all 300 plus million guns in America. It's not going to happen. So what can we do to reduce the carnage? And gun safety would be a big one. I mean, and the NRA should be in favor of this. This is what their starting mission was, not lobbying Congress, but gun safety. If you're going to own a gun, you should practice using it and go to the range and be skilled at it, or else you probably shouldn't have a gun, because of the statistics showing the number of accidents that happen, or suicides, or people lose their tempers, and bad things happen.
The gun issue is one that I've in the past found really difficult to discuss with anyone from the U.S., because you can have a reasonable discussion with a number of people on any number of topics, but a lot of the time in my experience, as soon as you touch on gun control or gun safety, it just goes off the rails real fast.
It does, yes. Guns have something of almost a religious taint to them in America. I've seen these bizarre parallels. It's like the Constitution is like the Bible, and guns are these toadish, almost fetishized religious icons, that they represent something more than what they are.
Like a crucifix with a trigger.
Jonathan Haidt calls these moral foundations. These are, what he means by that are like deep moral commitments to certain principles or feelings that you're not willing to give up. Like, I'll bend on this, I'll bend on that, but this thing over here, I am not bending. And guns have kind of gotten into that category, along with the Second Amendment and the Constitution in general. I mean, the Constitution is one of the greatest documents ever penned by some of the smartest people in history, but they weren't gods.
No.
They're not omniscient beings. And the culture that they wrote that in is so different than today's culture. And the guns, just take that as an example. I mean, we're talking, barrel loading muskets, that take, a minute to fire. Load up all you want on the muskets. But, of course, that's not what we have now. And so people claim that they like to have, these assault rifles, AK-47s and AR-15s and so on, but it's too easy to convert them into automatic and really truly assault rifles that are used for only one reason, is to kill people. And it's okay, we'll use it for sport. Okay, well, fine. Then keep your rifle at the shooting range.
Yeah,
something like that. I mean,
that's
the
hunting lodge. Yeah.
In Europe, you're allowed to have some of these weapons, but you have to be licensed, and they have to be stored. Usually, in some countries, they have to be stored at the range.
Yes.
And I like that idea, because then it's not sitting around the house where you blow a fuse and get mad and shoot somebody.
Well, that's a common problem too, because a lot of times, in the case of murder or attempted murder, a lot of those cases are not people who are probably going to be serial murderers, but they get angry once and they flip out because of an emotional state, and they grab a weapon or they attack. If you've got a gun on you and you're in that state, all it takes is a moment to whip that gun out and shoot someone.
Yep. And then for the rest of your life, you have that to live up to, and I mean, to bear. Yeah. And, it's like that person probably would never do that again, but, you spend the rest of your life in jail because of that. And also somebody's lost their life. It's terrible. It's just terrible.
It's probably, again, one of those problems that we like to think of ourselves as, that's that whole issue of free will versus our biological nature. We like to think we're above that. Like, I'm a good person. I would never shoot someone.
Right.
But, how many people who've murdered someone in a fit of emotion would say the exact same thing until it happened?
Yep, that's right. Exactly. And we all have buried in our brains our rage circuit.
Yep.
And most of the time, you have control over it. It rarely erupts, but it's there for a reason. It's an evolved part. It's part of our evolved brain that was there because we evolved in a dangerous environment with other organisms, other creatures, other group members, or people in other groups that could be dangerous, and you need to be able to fight back. And anger is sometimes a useful emotion to have, but it can get out of control.
Let's do a little more on politics, though, because you consider yourself a libertarian, correct?
Sort of, yes. I'm more of an issues guy, but I've leaned libertarian most of my life since college.
Yeah.
And but I've changed my mind on certain issues that libertarians are not too happy about. And the reason I avoid using the term so much now is because it pigeonholes you into a category in which and then it makes it more like a religion. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, so libertarian, so you can't believe in any gun controls, right? It's like, well, no, actually, I think maybe background checks are a good idea, and magazine clips should be a certain, it's just a few things. It's like, you've abandoned us,
right?
Like what are we, a tribe?
Right. It's like a rhino. You're a Republican name only. You're a you're a lino or something.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So these are these are the points you have to hold to, all of them, or else you're not in our tribe.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe I don't want to be in the tribe. Maybe I just want to look at issues in what I like about the libertarians is I don't like either the far right or far left, and so it sort of pushes toward more of the middle.
Okay. So when it comes to it's the Second Amendment, right? About the use of firearms. Okay, so anything to do with violence should be a trait that's kind of going down within our progress. Whereas speech, which is often put as an equivalent to when you get into these discussions about people who really quote the Constitution a lot for their firearms. Okay, but speech and firearms, in my opinion, are very different issues. Speech is something we should be using more and getting better at, becoming more important and more emphasized.
Yes.
And this is probably the work of genius in the Constitution, is that it can be altered. And hopefully at some point, some kind of alteration reflecting a changing time will be able to take care of this. I don't think it'll be anytime soon.
A change of what?
Well, if isn't it the amendment could be altered if a certain amount of states or votes in Congress?
That's correct. Yes. And it's a good balance to have. You want the Constitution to be able to be modified, for changing circumstances, but not willy nilly, not just on a whim. And that's why it usually takes a long time for these things to change. And that's probably good. But free speech, that's probably the most important amendment in there. And there are very few instances short of libel, just lying about somebody to damage them. Short of that, even the fire in a crowded theater, Hitchens has a great video. If you Google Hitchens, free speech, you'll get his speech he gives, where he opens his speech saying "fire, fire, fire," because there I said it in a theater. And even that argument by the Supreme Court Justice, I think it was Oliver Wendell Holmes, that was done for a particular reason, not as a general principle. That there are very few restrictions. There should be very few restrictions on free speech, and the reason for that was articulated by John Stuart Mill in his 1859 book On Liberty. He outlined the really key reasons why we need to allow people to say what they want to say, especially if we disagree with them. Not the least of which is you might be wrong. You might learn something from this person. You might learn why you're wrong.
Yeah.
Or they're wrong, but they make certain points that force you to better articulate your argument.
Yes. I get that a lot when I disagree with people online. Some people, they don't understand why I get into so many disagreements. And I'm not talking about everyone saying, I hate you, I'm never going to talk to you again. I mean, just disagreements back and forth. I think that the reason I'm driven to do that more than most people that I know is that it does exactly what you just said. It forces me to make sure that I've examined my position, I can articulate it well, and if I can't do that, then I might be wrong. There's a very good chance that I'm mistaken.
Yep, that's right. And so, like back in the 90s, when I was investigating the Holocaust deniers and the creationists, and we did issues of skeptic on those topics, and I wrote books about these topics. It really forced me to explain how I know that evolution happened, or how I know the Holocaust happened. It's the kind of thing we tend to take for, well, of course, evolution happened. Everybody knows that. Everyone knows the Holocaust happened. Okay, well, how do you know? And, what's the evidence? And so when somebody challenges you, can you articulate an answer without just saying, "Oh, you're a religious nutball," or you're an anti-Semite, neo-Nazi skinhead, or whatever? That may be true of your opponents, but that doesn't answer their challenge.
Right.
Can you explain it? Like the other day with the rapper B.O.B., saying the Earth is flat, and everybody laughed about it. It's like, okay, but can you actually articulate how we know that the Earth is not flat? Can you give, say, 3 reasons how we know, or 5, or what? I mean, there's a dozen ways we know, but can you say it? So I used that as an excuse to just kind of go through how it is we know the Earth is wrong. Well, how do we know the Holocaust happened? Whatever. And these guys, as my opponents, would send me stuff like, "How do you explain this, Shermer?" And it's the same thing with the 9/11 truthers. They'll send me these things. It's like, I don't know. I don't know the explanation for this. And then I'll go track it down. And so I'm better off for it. Now, of course, I can't do this with everything. No one does. We don't have that much time. But the things that you specialize in, or that you choose to debate or focus on, well, then allowing the opposition to voice their opinions is a good thing. If that's what you want. Now, it's also important to clarify the free speech thing when we're talking about the Constitution, the First Amendment. Here we're talking about restricting public speech. Like for me, as the publisher of Skeptic Magazine, I'm not obligated to give Holocaust deniers or 9/11 truthers free space in the magazine to voice their opinion. And if I don't, I'm in violation of the First Amendment. That's not at all the case. We can't cover everything. I have to make choices. And my deciding not to say run an ad by the 9/11 truthers or do an article that they really would like me to do on them, that's not restricting their free speech. I'm free to do what I want. They're free to do what they want. We're talking about the First Amendment. We're just talking about the government not coming in to restrict people's free speech. They're free. 9/11 truthers are free to make all the internet videos they want, and they do.
Yeah. Or perhaps it would be also, I think it would be covered if the government had to get involved in the sense of protecting one person or smaller group from a larger one. If for some reason, say someone didn't like what you were publishing, they decided to shut you down through some type of means through the court, then the government, then it would apply too, right? Because they have to step in and go, all right.
Yes, exactly.
Is a warranted charge?
As long as we're not slandering somebody. I mean, I can't publish an article about whoever, David Irving or Deepak Chopra or something, and just make up lies about them just to damage them because I don't like them. That would be there. They would have a case, in court against me. And so, but that's a different subject. That's a different issue than, allowing people to stand on a street corner and preach or whatever.
So Deepak, we're not going to declare him to be a secret reptilian from another dimension.
No, I've gotten to know Deepak pretty well over the last couple of years, and I've come to like him, and I've come to understand where he's coming from. His stuff that he says, he actually means something by those sort of cryptic sounding tweets and phrases that he comes up with, like quantum consciousness kind of thing. And Sam helped me understand this through his own interest, Sam Harris, in his own interest in Buddhism. In Buddhism, you have a certain perspective about the universe that begins with your own brain, your own thoughts. Because, if you're dead or your brain is dead, there is no universe for you, for your brain. It's gone. And in a way, that's kind of where Deepak's coming from, that consciousness is the starting point. His first principle, his first starting point is consciousness. Because without that, there is no universe for that particular brain. And then so everything works out from there. That consciousness is fundamental to the universe and so on. And it's really just a different starting point in a different world than most, non-dualist scientists. Most of us are monists, although Deepak says he's a monist too, that there's only one substance, it's consciousness, and everything derives from that. Well, okay. But my point is that if you actually try to get to, that's the other thing about free speech and also being respectful and trying to understand somebody else's position, by doing that, you may actually learn something. Like I didn't know that much about, Eastern philosophy and meditation and Buddhism and consciousness research until I met Deepak and started like, well, what's the story with this guy? What does he mean when he says this? And so I kind of had to force myself to learn some of that, and I'm a better person for that.
I do have a kind of a question, though, going back to something you said earlier. Do you think that a lot of the problem that comes with having a discussion with people about how they know things or the way that they argue it is how they initially learn that information, the way that statistics or percentages are presented to them? Because I find even in my college experience that a lot of people are willing to take any sort of stats or percentages at face value, and they never ask the question, what does it mean? Why is that number important? And how did they get that number?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's really important today because everybody has numbers. I don't know if you ever go to the website 538.com. That's all they do is statistics and numbers, and they're really useful about those kinds of discussions. Like, well, we're particularly in this political season, everybody has surveys and data and charts and to support their, what does it mean? And same thing with with the climate deniers, who I got to know them too. Okay, what's their arguments, and how do we know that they're wrong, and how do we know that the Earth is getting warmer? That sort of thing. Well, they'll have graphs and charts and statistics. Also, it's like how can we be looking at the same graph and concluding the opposite? How is that possible? And it's exactly what you just said. It's like, what do these numbers actually mean? We have to have a discussion about that, because anybody can just say they have numbers.
Right. And that's what I noticed. Like, I mean, I think that when you get into, and I use this term only because it's a term I've heard, like the softer sciences, where kind of they have to take a perspective and then kind of look at whatever evidence they get presented to them in a survey, and then they can kind of take that perspective and add it into what kind of ascribe a meaning to those numbers.
Yeah.
I find that when people who are in those kind of courses or classes, whether it be, sociology or whatnot, they tend to make those numbers become their gospel. This is their truth. And, unlike more hardline science where, your evidence has to be peer reviewed and then substantiated by your peers, and then you have to continually prove your hypothesis to ensure that it is an accurate reflection of reality. I find it's almost the direct opposite when you're discussing with people these percentages or numbers that come out of these sociological studies or surveys or more qualitative data, because they just look at it and they go, well, if you look at it through this lens, this is what it means, and this is always what it means, and any argument against that is X, Y, or Z, whether it's privilege, race, or gender, or whatever it is they're arguing for.
Yes, absolutely. That's right. And so in each case, we have to take it issue by issue, and ask, that question, where does that number come from, and how are you interpreting that? So in that sense, the social sciences are the hard sciences. There's so many more variables, and there's so many more ways to manipulate statistics. It's really hard to know if somebody's new theory or hypothesis or finding is real or not. Because they're often hard to duplicate, hard to replicate, and somebody can come up with numbers that seem to point in the opposite direction of your conclusion, and that's why when we're talking about things like intelligence, and then we start talking about IQ and scores on an IQ test, it's like, well, wait a minute, we just made a leap there from intelligence to IQ scores. Are they really the same?
Yeah,
and you have to ask that in social sciences. You have to ask that all the time. Because people tend to reify or make real numbers, all of a sudden a number becomes something in somebody's head, a skill or a talent, or becomes a phenomenon in society, culture, politics, whatever. And it's like we have to step back and remember, well, wait a minute, where'd that come from in the first place? It doesn't really mean that.
Hey, well, I've learned one thing from the internet. Everyone has an IQ in the 160 plus range, so we can just ignore real data on intelligence. But yeah, that's just like, I mean, I think there are a lot of people who are in the social sciences who are very well meaning, and a lot of them who believe in a more libertarian value, freedom of speech and whatnot. But I think that they tend to either be a silent majority or a very, very quiet minority. Like, I'm not entirely certain which, just in my own experience, because sitting in classes, you are fed information and you're really not told to critically evaluate it.
It's bad enough. I should just say this. It's bad enough that Smashlock and I are thinking about making an audio track, just going through and reading parts of his textbook. The stuff that's in there, it's mind-blowingly bad. Like, it's just ridiculous stuff. At one point, I'll give you an example. At one point, it takes a sideways swipe at our current prime minister at that time, who was a conservative. It accuses him of having an agenda for a new world order. In the textbook. I was blown away. It's like, this is insane. A disagreement like this, presenting evidence for a disagreement with the current government tactic is one thing.
Right, but then spinning it out of control into something else, well, that happens, and it happens a lot. I mean, that's the nature of conspiracy theories, and the problem, the thing I've been thinking about recently is what bothers me, especially about like the 9/11 truthers and other conspiracy theorists, but them in particular. There are real things that go on, real conspiracies.
Yes. Yeah.
That don't involve, global domination and, all this grand stuff, but are really, potentially dangerous. The stuff that, about the NSA spying on us, those are really important issues that we should be focused on and not distracted by this nonsense about how Bush orchestrated 9/11 to get us into the war. But there are reasons why we, that are more complex for, Middle Eastern politics and why we're there that don't have to do with global domination conspiracy theories, but are important. Or, the stuff about Kissinger and Nixon and what we were doing in South American dictatorships and propping up this dictator instead of that one. And, stuff that's still coming back to bite us now. Like, remember, we used to support Saddam Hussein. And, we're in bed with the House of Saud now, Saudi Arabia. What are the implications of that in the coming decades? And those are the real conspiracies.
Yeah.
In the sense that, our government does a lot of this stuff without telling us. That by definition is a conspiracy. Then we find out about it later. That should be the focus of these people's attention.
I agree with you 100%. I'm starting to wonder, though. Well, not starting to wonder. I pretty much will ascribe blame to our school systems because they really don't teach critical thinking or any sort of analytical skills when it comes to the evaluation of evidence. And I find that when you get into like the conspiracy theories, like the ones that people consider nutty, when you point out the inconsistencies in their theories and where they're wrong, they don't listen because they have this confirmation bias because they can point to those 10 or 20 examples throughout the last 50 or 60 years where the conspiracy was real. And that just reaffirms that every other conspiracy that they believe must also by default be true as well.
Slippery slope of the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a basic fundamental principle of critical thinking is focusing your attention on one particular thing instead of generalizing too much. It's like the government lied about the Roswell incident. They said it was a weather balloon, and it turns out it was a high-altitude surveillance acoustic device to listen for Soviet upper atmosphere tests of nuclear weapons. And, of course, they didn't tell us that in 1947 because the Cold War was just heating up.
Yeah.
And so they lied. And so the UFO people go, they lied. Look, so it was aliens. No. The fact that the government lies about some military secret doesn't mean there's extraterrestrials. And at this point in your life, if you're surprised that governments lie to citizens about things for national security reasons, you've been in a cave. I mean, this happens a lot. And again, those are the kinds of things that are the real issues we should be debating. National security secrets versus our right to know as a democracy. To what extent the NSA should be spying on us to protect us versus our privacy. I mean, those are the real debates. Not 9/11 truth or JFK or the magic. The people still harassing me about the magic bullet and JFK. It's like, come on, you're wasting cognitive space. It's been done. It's over. It's gone. Move on to something else.
My brother's theory on that from way back in high school is that they have his brain secretly frozen in a secret government museum.
Okay, yes. Well, we're going to bring Kennedy back to life along with Marilyn Monroe. And Hitler's living in South America somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, and his bones were a woman's bones, apparently. That's the one I've been hearing circulating a lot lately.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, maybe he and Marilyn had a mind meld or something. Things that they were melding.
Hey, I am Michael Shermer, the director of the Skeptic Society, the publisher of Skeptic Magazine. We investigate claims of the paranormal, pseudoscience, and fringe groups and cults and claims of all kinds between. Science and pseudoscience and non-science, junk science, voodoo science, pathological science, bad science, non-science, and plain old nonsense. And unless you've been on Mars recently, there's a lot of that out there. Some people call us debunkers, which is kind of a negative term, but let's face it, there's a lot of bunk. And we are like the bunco squads of the police departments out there flushing out. Well, we're sort of like the Ralph Naders of bad ideas, trying to replace bad ideas with good ideas. I'll show you an example of a bad idea. I brought this with me. This was given to us by NBC Dateline to test. It's produced by the Quadro Corporation of West Virginia. It's called the Quadro 2000 Dowser Rod. This was being sold to high school administrators for $900 a piece. It's a piece of plastic with a Radio Shack antenna attached to it. You can douse for all sorts of things, but this particular one was built to douse for marijuana in students' lockers. So the way it works is you go down the hallway and you see if it tilts toward a particular locker, and then you open the locker. So it looks something like this. I'll show you. It has kind of a right-leaning bias, so I'll show you. Well, this is science, so we'll do a controlled experiment. It'll go this way for sure. Sir, you want to empty your pockets, please, sir? So the question was, can it actually find marijuana in students' lockers? And the answer is, if you open enough of them, yes. But in science, we have to keep track of the misses, not just the hits, and that's probably the key lesson to my short talk here, is that this is how psychics work, astrologers and tarot card readers and so on. People remember the hits, they forget the misses. In science, we have to keep the whole database and look to see if the number of hits is somehow stands out from the total number that you would expect by chance.
I agree, though. We should just examine, if I'm understanding you correctly, so correct me if I'm wrong, but we got to examine each claim on its own merit, one at a time. You can't just take them as a cluster.
Yeah, exactly. So, the example I use is, are you a global warming skeptic, or are you skeptical of the global warming skeptics, which would make you a believer? And so you have to ask that question separately for each issue, and the answer depends on the particular claim. So I used to be kind of skeptical of the global warming proponents, because it seemed like there was a lot of exaggeration, and not just the global warming, sort of the environmental movement. It seemed to got way out of control, and people like Paul Ehrlich, making these outlandish predictions about the end of oil and the end of precious minerals, and billions of people starving to death, and all this was going to happen in the 1980s, 1990s at the latest, and none of it happened. So that made me skeptical. But then, specifically on the global warming issue, that's a nice example, because either the Earth is getting warmer or it's not. Right. It shouldn't make a difference whether you're a Democrat or Republican.
It shouldn't make a difference.
It shouldn't, but it does. Once you see people lined up by political persuasion on a scientific issue, you realize you're into something different. This is not just a scientific question.
I am willing to accept that I will be dead before that argument is resolved, and will matter little to me at that point.
Yeah, that's probably
so.
Since we're running out of time, I just wanted to say, going through the moral arc, You might find this interesting. For me, the most difficult part was actually when you were going through talking about animals.
Oh, yes.
I'm somebody who knows I would never be able to really, well, maybe I could if I had to, but it would be very difficult for me to kill my own food.
Yes, well, that's true for all of us, really.
And you walk through so many examples that are so difficult. It was actually an emotional part of the book for me. Like, very difficult things to consider. And, Smashlog apparently has no problem shooting animals.
Okay. Yeah, but how about your dog? Would you shoot your dog?
I don't own a dog, but
yeah,
there have been situations in my life, like, because I had several instances in my life where an animal was suffering and we've had to get it put down humanely, obviously. But there was one instance that I recall from my youth where a family member had to kill an animal on site because it had gotten itself caught in an engine a blade.
Okay.
So I mean, I that was more of a mercy killing. So I mean, it was a difficult choice, but would I kill my own pet? I would have to say that, like anything, I would examine that on a situational basis. Like, I mean, if my animal was rabid and coming after me or one of my kids, then the question would be absolutely, or the answer would be absolutely. But if it was, me starving,
but it'd still be more difficult, I think.
Well, yeah, it would definitely be more difficult. I'm not trying to make it sound like it would be easy, but yeah, I don't know. That is a tough one, though.
Well, I was trying to capture in my chapter on animal rights and the moral arc just the overall trend line of in being more inclusive of more and more animals, more species into our moral consideration. Now, it's not exactly the same as gay rights, or women's rights or civil rights. Obviously, we're not talking about animals voting or animals having the right to get married. It's a different category for sure. But it comes right back down to the moral foundation where we really start to build it. And as articulated by Jeremy Bentham, who's sort of the father of animal rights movement, is the question not can they think or can they talk, but can they suffer?
Yeah.
It's the suffering of sentient beings that is where we begin. And, as we move from there, we can add more and more rights depending on the species. But for animals, do they have an opportunity to live out their physiological nature? Can they run free? Can they chase things and have fresh air and so on? And there's a lot of, farms that do this now. To try to move away from factory farms to these little, I call them happy farms, where Babe the pig gets to run around and have fun until, the big day comes. And so that at least, it's a start. Obviously, Google, one of Google X's projects is to make synthetic meat. Just replace all animal meat with synthetic meat.
Oh, like on Star Trek.
Yeah. The idea kind of grosses people out, but if you ever go to or watch one of these documentaries about factory farms, you'll be grossed out even more.
Yeah.
And I think most people would eat synthetic meat. It's just a cultural thing. We get used to it. Once it tasted as good, they're not there yet. But but in the long run, I think a couple things I talk about at the end of that chapter is making that shift away from factory farms. But to do that, we got to get the control of the population, which probably won't happen till we reach about 2100 or so, when probably the Earth's population will be back down around to where it is now, maybe slightly lower. And then as we go through the 22nd century, population numbers will probably get down into just 1 or 2 billion. As more and more people become prosperous and educated, particularly women in Africa, the rates of population growth are already collapsing in most industrial educated nations, like in Northern Europe. Once that happens worldwide, then there'll just be far fewer people to feed, and those kinds of smaller farms or synthetic meat, so on and so on. I think we can get to a point where we can live a sustainable life that's rich and prosperous and technological and scientific and industrial and so forth without exploiting things, including animals. It's going to be a longer right revolution than, say, gay rights or the animal rights one will take much longer. But we're getting there. There's progress there. I think bullfighting, for example, will be gone soon, and that's sort of the last of the barbaric practices in Western culture that are left.
there are still places in the world that use like primates for both medical and psychological experiments, though. I would assume that you would kind of cluster that into like factory farming and things as far as unethical treatment of animals.
Oh yes, absolutely, and so I'm super encouraged by the fact that that in America that primates are at least chimpanzees anyway, are being retired to their little happy Club Med chimp land afterwards. And that's good. That's the treatment of, and that should happen for all primates in the long run. Hopefully, as computer programs get more sophisticated, you can replace animal models with computer models for testing things. We're still not quite there yet, as I understand it, but getting there. And again, just you should always ask yourself: are there animals suffering because of what I'm doing? That's where we begin. That's the moral consideration.
Right. Well, I just remember being in one of my psychology classes and watching a video on an animal that had a I believe it was a rhesus monkey, and there was one wire-framed mother with a bottle of milk, and then another one that was all snuggly and warm, and it always went to that one, even if it was starving to its detriment. And I just remember thinking, how cruel, and I understand it was in the 1950s or 60s that this experiment took place, and I can't remember the name of the researcher who did it, but that's kind of the small part of the story. It's that, even while I was watching that, I couldn't believe that at any point that people considered this to be something that would be okay.
Yeah. Well, that research couldn't be done anymore, which is good. Similar to like Milgram shock experiments or Zimbardo's fake prison experiments. So
the Stanford.
You can't really do that anymore because there's now ethical committees about the proper treatment of subjects in experiments, including animal subjects. And when I was in graduate school, I worked in a Skinner lab at Cal State Fullerton. We had rats and pigeons and people, mostly rats and pigeons. We didn't have any primates, but there was proper care and feeding of the rats and pigeons. But the treatment is far better now. Although I had the job one semester of having to sacrifice the animals after we were done with the experiments, and I wanted to just let them go. Like, why can't I just take the rats up to the local hills and let them go? At least maybe some snake will have dinner. Or, the local hawk will have lunch, as opposed to just gassing them. I had to gas them. I mean,
what was the rationale for that? Sorry to interrupt, but what was the rationale for that?
Just legal reasons that it would contaminate the local environment with a species that doesn't belong there. And these white rats, they're bred just for experiments. They would have no idea how to live out in the wild. And it's not clear their instincts would kick in and allow it.
Let the researchers take them home and give them to their kids as a pet.
Yes, I know.
All right.
Anyway, but I wouldn't do that now. I just couldn't do it. I wouldn't.
But you make a good.
To see that there's now computer programs. There's one called Sniffy, in which you can operantly condition a rat to press a bar, but it's all a virtual reality. It's a digital rat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
right. And they also have I think it's Japan. I may be wrong on this, but I remember reading on a science news site that they have these biochips now that simulate human neurons, and they can test drugs out on them. So now they can kind of test out the effects of drugs on artificial brain cells instead of applying them to animals or people.
Right.
Now, one day we might be having these discussions about artificial intelligence rights.
Right.
Absolutely. That's one of the areas I talk about future moral progress is a couple of things. One would be the future. The rights of future generations to have a sustainable Earth, a place to live.
Right.
But also AI is coming for sure. Was Data on Star Trek a person? That was one of their episodes. Science fiction people have been dealing with this for a century. And they've played out all the courtroom scenes and stuff like that. What does it mean to be human or a person, or the legal rights and so forth? But now that's coming probably within a decade or two, if people like Ray Kurzweil are right, that we achieve human level AI. not just but both specific and general intelligence. And then at one point, is it, do they have rights to not be turned off or unplugged or dismantled?
I don't want to see the bill for reparations when machines start protesting on college campuses about the systemic oppression for centuries that they face.
Exactly.
Pictures of
safe space for robots.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I could talk to you for a lot longer, I'm sure. Okay. Did you want to mention? Sorry?
I said I appreciate that. I love your show. It's great. Check out your website. Your website is pretty cool.
Oh, thanks. Did you want to mention Skeptic?
Oh yeah. So if listeners are interested, they can go to skeptic.com, which is our webpage, and you can subscribe to Skeptic Magazine there and join the society, or you can just scan through thousands of free articles and reviews and videos, and there's a ton of free content on there. And we have eSkeptic, which is the free electronic version of the magazine. It comes out every Wednesday. And, we have a science salon that we put on once a month. And we have our podcast. We do the whole full service operation for skepticism.
Nice.
And really, we're just a pro-science organization. So science education, this is our thing.
Yeah.
Because we believe that that's going to make more of a difference to the future of civilization, is teaching people how to think critically, using reason and science. That's where the action is.
It was great talking to you. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys. No, I really appreciate it. You're doing good work. All this stuff, we're all just kind of chipping away.
Yeah.
And that's how we change the world.
And just off since we're off the record here, I'll just say I appreciate the fact that you are taking a stand on some issues that are unpopular to take a stand on. I really do appreciate that.
Like what?
Well, even just making jokes about Safespace.
Oh yes. Oh boy. I just got my agent just booked me at a speaking engagement at Cal State Fullerton next month on this very set. Free speech dangerous for students?
Right.
And I'm going to stick it to them, man.
I hope so.
Can be bedwetters worried about Safespace. And then the same day I teach at Chapman University one class a week, one day a week, Skepticism 101, and they just issued this Safespace, this workshop on Safespace. It goes for 3 hours, and it's optional. I don't have to go, but I'm going to go just to see what it's all about. It has this the faculty and staff Safespace workshop is an educational intervention designed to support members of the LGBTQIA, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer / questioning, intersex, asexual, and all underrepresented sexual gender and or romantic identity. Holy
Okay, this stuff is gold. I want to leave this in, but I wish we could get some Apostasy Now Snuggies just to send so that all the people who want Safespace can just snuggle up with that. Because I don't know what your stance is on this, but I literally had an in-class lecture on, and you get a certificate if you make it through the entire class on privilege.
Oh, privilege, yes. Well,
yeah, acknowledging your privilege.
We white boys,
right?
It's like, come on, this has gone too far.
Yeah. Yeah, I am not a popular student when I say I don't even acknowledge the concept as they put it.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Well, I just want to quickly ask you, the recorder's still going. Can I use this part on the show?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That's
absolutely. I mean, it's like, this is an example of the pendulum swinging too far. I mean, the moral progress begins with, changing the way people think about other people. Okay, that's good. And, talking about African Americans or women or Jews in a certain way back in the 20s and 30s, when you look at some of the literature, it's just cringeworthy the way, people would speak about other people. And so, changing that is a good thing. And then, by the time we get to Dr. King in the 60s and so on, there's, a lot of tractable moral progress that came as a result of people protesting and so on. But then it just kept going. And in a way, I think about all these campus protests over Halloween costumes and so on, and people laugh about it. I do too. But in a way, it's a sign of moral progress, that if the only thing left is to protest is Halloween costumes. How far have we come? I mean, this is a good sign.
But that's the thing. It's not the only thing worthwhile left to protest. There are issues in the world and in our own nations, like plural, that are worthy of our attention. And talking about cultural appropriation and privilege are just not on my radar to fix.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And this is why some of us are using this phrase, the regressive left. That it's really caught on is that you guys are missing the bigger issues, like the mistreatment of women in Muslim countries that people like Ayaan Hirsi Ali are protesting.
Yeah.
And meanwhile on campuses they're worried about Halloween costumes and safe spaces and microaggressions when there are real issues still left. That we need to focus on, and this isn't one of them.
I think the critical reasoning is exactly it. They're mimicking what they've seen in the past, but they're not analyzing how it's being employed. Right? So so it looks the same, and to them it sounds the same, but the underlying problem is that they're now pushing for issues that are we're laughing at them.
And I'm not calling bullshit on what you just said, but I will say this is my closing thought, that because of the area of study that I'm in, kind of a paraprofessional social service work that I'm going into, I believe that area has a lot of benefit that it can provide society. But a lot of these institutions and organizations propagate and continue to grow based on the funding that they get from the statistics and surveys.
They become institutionalized.
They are keeping the outrage going to sustain their existence.
Yeah.
And that's all. It's so self-serving.
That's absolutely right. Then there's a kind of a moral panic that sets in, and then a preemptive denunciation of other people before you get denounced. It's part of a witch hunt.
Yeah.
And then also the sort of the virtue signaling, as it's called.
Yes. Oh,
you
man.
try to signal to others, I am so virtuous. I will denounce any little microaggression I can find, just so you know that I know that I'm a super moral, and it just gets out of hand.
I just love the beginning when it's like, before I speak, let me confess that I am white. I acknowledge my whiteness. I am sorry for it, but if I may please speak anyway about anything.
No, I've gotten in trouble a few times because I don't put trigger warnings on class presentations.
Well, I tell my class that here's your trigger warning. This whole class is a trigger warning.
Right.
I mean, I'm teaching critical thinking. We're supposed to think about controversial issues of all kinds. If you can't find something you disagree with, and then you're not paying attention. I mean, it's okay. It's all right to hear people that don't agree with you. And
absolutely.
If you're afraid of an idea, then you don't have any business learning about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, safe spaces are where ideas go to die.
Yeah.
Where culture goes to die. Where free speech goes to die. I mean, just, buck up. The world's not fair, and work to change it, make it better. Don't run and hide somewhere. It's just not productive. It's not part of the kind of moral progress I talk about that's been underway for centuries. This is a regressive. It's a form of. It's going the wrong direction that we need to correct.
It's a retreat from critical thinking.
It's kind of like if he had said, "I had a dream where black people and white people could go to different parts of the campus and not associate with each other.
No cultural appropriation.
where people had safe spaces with puppies."
Yeah. Oh, well.
Yes. Well, I mean, this is a serious issue. I think that this sort of balkanization of college campuses and culture at large of, the blacks go over here, the whites go over there.
Oh, yeah.
Over there. It's like, wait a minute. Why don't we just put everybody in camps and just put a sign up saying, this is really regressive. It's dangerous.
Yes.
It's scary.
Yeah.
For decades we were working toward integration and quit looking at people as races, because racist is not a real thing. It's a cultural construct. And now it's like, if you say, I don't see black and white, that's considered racist. What?
Yeah. It's turned on its head.
Microaggression. According to the University of California list of microaggressions is saying, let me see, I have it in the LA Times op-ed here. Let's see, the privilege of paleness. Oh my God. There's something about if you say, I don't see color, that's considered to be a microaggression. Well, I'm sure I do, but I try not to. I mean, I'd rather not to. Oh, here it is. When I look at you, I don't see color. Or there is only one race, the human race, and I don't believe in race. Those are now considered microaggressions according to the University of California document titled Recognizing Microaggressions.
So who are the idiots that ratified that?
Well, the administrators, the liberals of the 60s that are now professors and administrators running the show, they feel like they're supposed to be liberal. They're supposed to go along with this microaggression stuff, but they're forgetting that was the whole point back in the day, that we're quit looking at people by the color of their skin and judge them by the content of their character.
Right. Well, with microaggressions in particular, I put out every now and then I make little pictures. I put them up on Facebook or something, and I equated it directly out of a passage from 1984 on thought crime.
Yeah. Beautiful. Right.
Yeah, and I've actually been surprised how few people nowadays know the contents of 1984 at all.
Yes.
Like a Madonna?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, scary stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, that should get me in trouble. Now I'm a true apostate.
All right, well, thank you very much. It's great meeting you.
All right, thanks, guys. You're doing good work.
Thanks.
I would say you're doing God's work, but, well, I won't say that.
God. All right.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, partner, how you want to do this?
I like that. It's got a nice roll off your tongue there.
All right, now we're not that close. Don't kumbaya with me. Don't kumbaya.
I'm gonna get my bucket and towel and waterboard his ass.
Nah, we gotta give him a chance to talk. You got anything to say?
I hope you guys like the taste of balls, because I'm gonna chop yours off, stuff them in your mouths.
See?
Or maybe I'll put yours in his, and his in yours.
Let me get the bucket.
Kumbaya.